The cul-de-sac had always seemed like the perfect place to raise a family. Nestled between rows of polished houses and ornamental lawns, it wore a mask of serenity that fooled newcomers into thinking it was a haven untouched by the roughness of the world. I was one of those newcomers years ago when I bought the brick front house with the wide porch and the oak tree that shaded the driveway. I had believed, perhaps naively, that the carefully trimmed hedges and pristine sidewalks were signs of harmony. But I would learn that beauty in a neighborhood like ours often masked something rotten, something that grew behind closed blinds and under the iron grip of those who believed themselves rulers of the block. It began with whispers. The Homeowners Association, or as everyone came to call it, the HOA, was not just a committee of volunteers ensuring lawns were mowed and trash bins were pulled in on time. It was a miniature kingdom, and its self-appointed officials wore invisible crowns. They issued citations with smug delight, convened secretive meetings, and bullied residents who dared resist. Their most notorious tool was the so-called security officer, a man named Gerard Lane. Gerard was not a police officer, nor did he have any legitimate credentials. He was a man in his early 50s, tall but heavyset, with a belly that pressed uncomfortably against the black uniform shirt he had purchased online. His cap bore no official insignia, only the word security, stitched in white block letters. Yet, he strutted through the neighborhood as though he were the final line of defense between civilization and chaos. He carried himself with arrogance, hands resting on his belt, as if holstered weapons were at his side, though technically he was not supposed to be armed while on patrol. But Gerard had always wanted power. And when men thirst for power, but lack legitimacy, they become dangerous. For years, I tolerated him, his glares when my grass grew half an inch too long, his warnings when my recycling bin tilted the wrong way. I ignored his boasts about keeping this neighborhood clean. He was the HOA's weapon, their enforcer, their watchdog. My daughter, Evelyn, was the one who refused to bow. She was 32 now, though to me she would always be the little girl with scraped knees and an indomitable spirit. Evelyn had a quiet strength about her. She did not flaunt her achievements, nor did she walk around demanding recognition. She lived privately, rarely disclosing the true nature of her work. Neighbors knew her as the polite, disciplined woman who jogged in the mornings and helped elderly Mrs. Thornton carry groceries when arthritis weakened her arms. They didn't know that behind her calm smile and unassuming presence lay years of tactical training, field experience, and the title of FBI Tactical Commander. Evelyn had insisted we keep that part of her life discreet. She had said once, "The fewer people know, the better." Power works best when it is underestimated, but Gerard had never been one to underestimate with caution. He underestimated with arrogance. He assumed Evelyn was ordinary, just another resident he could push around. He had no idea what lay dormant beneath her composed demeanor. It was a Saturday afternoon when the tension first sparked into something I could no longer ignore. The neighborhood was unusually lively, children riding bicycles in loops, sprinklers painting arcs across emerald lawns, barbecue smoke curling into the sky. I was trimming the hedges near the front walk when I noticed Gerard parked at the end of our driveway in his old white SUV. The vehicle bore magnetic stickers that read Neighborhood Watch Security, though everyone knew no such organization had ever been certified. He stepped out with his typical swagger, clipboard in hand. His boots crunched against the pavement as he marched toward me, his brow furrowed in theatrical seriousness. "Afternoon," he barked. "We need to talk about your daughter's car." I set down the shears, already feeling the familiar rise of irritation. "What about it? It's parked facing the wrong direction on the curb. Against code. Page 4, Section 3 of the HOA Guidelines." I glanced at Evelyn's silver sedan, parked neatly and far from blocking any drive. "She was in a rush this morning," I replied calmly. "It's not bothering anyone. She'll move it later." Rules were rules, Gerard insisted. He tapped his clipboard, his jaw tightening. One violation leads to another. That's how neighborhoods decline. People like me are here to prevent that. Before I could respond, Evelyn herself appeared from the side of the house. She was dressed casually in black joggers and a gray t-shirt, her hair tied back in a no-nonsense ponytail. She had been helping me clear branches, her hands still dusty. "Is there a problem?" she asked evenly. Gerard turned to her, his tone sharpening. "Yes, there is. Your car's in violation. I suggest you move it immediately if you don't want a fine. And don't take that tone with me. I don't like disrespect." Evelyn didn't flinch. She stood with quiet authority, her gaze steady, her voice calm. "You don't have the right to issue fines. Only the whole board can. You're not law enforcement. You're a volunteer at best." The words hit Gerard like a slap. His face reddened, his chest puffed up with indignation. He stepped closer, invading her personal space. "Listen here, young lady. I've been keeping this neighborhood safe for 15 years. You think you can talk down to me?" I moved forward quickly, ready to intervene, but Evelyn raised a hand, small, precise, signaling me to wait. She didn't need my protection, though my fatherly instincts screamed otherwise. She met Gerard's glare without wavering. "I think you're overstepping," she said, "and I won't tolerate intimidation." Something flickered in his eyes then, an ugly spark, a hunger to reassert dominance. I could feel the air shift, charged with hostility. And though he stormed off after muttering threats about taking this to the board, I knew in my bones it would not end there. That evening, Evelyn sat with me on the porch. The cicadas sang from the trees, and the air smelled faintly of jasmine. But neither of us could relax. "He doesn't like being challenged," she said softly, sipping from a glass of iced tea. "Men like him never do." "I don't like the way he looked at you," I admitted. "It wasn't about the car. It was about control." Evelyn nodded. Her expression was unreadable, her training evident in the way she revealed little emotion. Yet I could sense the undercurrent, the quiet storm she kept hidden beneath layers of discipline. "Dad," she said finally, "if he pushes too far, let me handle it. I've dealt with worse than men like him." I wanted to ask her more. I wanted to demand why she seemed so certain. What part of her professional life had taught her to face down predators without fear? But she never shared those details. Perhaps she wanted to protect me from the ugliness she faced in her line of work. Or perhaps she believed that silence was safer. All I knew was this: the stage had been set. Gerard was humiliated, his fragile authority cracked by Evelyn's refusal to bow. And men like him, once humiliated, often reached for darker weapons. The night was peaceful, but I felt it deep in my gut. The storm was coming. That was the beginning. The last moment of calm before the home security decided to do the unthinkable. Before the gun was drawn. Before my daughter revealed exactly who she was. The following week unraveled like the slow tightening of a rope. Each day brought with it the faint sense that something was edging closer, something inevitable and dangerous. Gerard Lane had disappeared from sight for a few days after our clash, and for a moment I wondered if perhaps pride had driven him into retreat. But men like Gerard did not vanish for long. They simmered, they stewed, and when their self-fashioned authority was questioned, they struck back with greater force. On Wednesday evening, the neighborhood was alive with its usual rhythms. Lawns were mowed, sprinklers arced across the grass, dogs barked from behind white picket fences. The sunset spilled gold and crimson across the sky, turning the cul-de-sac into a painting of suburban tranquility. Yet beneath it, something felt brittle. I could sense it, though I could not name it. Evelyn returned home later than usual that evening, dressed in civilian clothes that did nothing to hint at the life she led beyond the boundaries of this street. She carried groceries in one arm and greeted me with her typical quiet smile. But even as she set the bags on the kitchen counter, I saw her pause, her head tilting slightly. She had heard something. "What is it?" I asked. She didn't answer at first. She walked to the front window and pushed the curtain aside just enough to look. Her eyes sharpened. "He's out there," she murmured. I joined her at the window, and there he was, Gerard, pacing near the curb, his white SUV idling with the driver's door open. He was dressed in his black security uniform again, but this time something gleamed at his hip. My chest tightened. It wasn't imagination. It wasn't a flashlight. It was the unmistakable outline of a holstered handgun. "Dear God," I whispered. "He's armed." Evelyn's jaw set, calm but firm. She turned from the window and began untying her ponytail, letting her hair fall around her shoulders as though shedding one skin for another. I could see the quiet transformation in her eyes, the switch from daughter to professional, from family to fighter. "Stay inside, Dad," she instructed. "Lock the door behind me." My instincts screamed to stop her, to beg her not to go out there, but I saw in her expression that it would be useless. Evelyn was not reckless. She was controlled, trained, and prepared. And yet, she was still my daughter. My heart thudded painfully as she opened the door and stepped onto the porch. Gerard turned the moment he saw her, his posture stiffening like a predator spotting prey. His face was flushed, his voice booming across the lawn. "You think you can embarrass me in front of the whole neighborhood?" he snarled. "You think you can talk down to me?" Evelyn did not raise her voice. She spoke evenly, her hands visible, her stance deliberate. "You're trespassing, Mr. Lane. You need to leave now. You don't give me orders." Gerard shouted, advancing a step. His hand brushed against the holster, fingers twitching with the temptation of power. The sight made bile rise in my throat. I cracked the door open, unable to keep silent. "Gerard, don't do this. Go home before you make the biggest mistake of your life." But he wasn't listening. His gaze was locked on Evelyn, burning with a mixture of anger and humiliation. She hadn't just challenged his authority, she had dismantled the fragile illusion he had built for himself. And he wanted to reclaim it, no matter the cost. "You think you're tough?" Gerard hissed. His hand gripped the pistol, pulling it from its holster in one reckless motion. The metallic click of the weapon clearing leather rang out like a thunderclap. Time seemed to slow. My breath caught in my chest. The world shrank to the sight of a gun pointed at my daughter. Every nightmare I had ever buried clawed its way to the surface. But Evelyn didn't flinch. Her posture remained steady, her eyes fixed on him with an unshakable calm that terrified me as much as it amazed me. She raised her voice, not in panic, but in command. "Lower the weapon." "Now." Gerard barked a laugh, though I could hear the tremor beneath it. His hand shook faintly. "Or what? You'll run crying to the whole board? You don't scare me." Evelyn's gaze sharpened, her words slicing through the dusk like steel. "You're aiming a loaded firearm at an unarmed civilian. That's a felony. You're seconds away from destroying your life. Put it down." The neighborhood had stilled. Curtains fluttered as neighbors peeked from behind blinds. The echo of children's laughter had vanished. Silence pressed down on us, heavy and suffocating. Gerard sneered, waving the gun carelessly. "You think you know the law? I am the law here. I protect this neighborhood." "No," Evelyn said softly, her tone carrying the weight of absolute authority. "You don't protect anyone. You endanger them." And then, in a voice that froze the blood in my veins, she added, "I am a Federal Bureau of Investigation tactical commander, and you're pointing a weapon at the wrong person." The words hung in the air, electric and undeniable. Gerard's eyes widened, confusion flashing across his face as though the world had suddenly tilted beneath him. He laughed again, but this time it was hollow, forced. "Yeah, right," he scoffed, though the sweat on his brow betrayed him. "You expect me to believe that?" "You don't need to believe," Evelyn said, her voice dropping to a deadly calm. "You just need to obey. Drop the weapon." Her hand twitched slightly, not toward him, but in the subtle readiness of someone who knew exactly how to disarm a threat if forced. She radiated something primal, yet disciplined, a quiet dominance that even Gerard, in his delusion, could sense. I gripped the doorframe, my knuckles white, every muscle in my body begging me to rush forward. But I couldn't. I knew that any movement from me could shatter the fragile balance. Evelyn was handling him, not with panic, not with anger, but with lethal precision. For one terrifying second, Gerard's finger hovered dangerously near the trigger. My heart nearly stopped. And then, with a guttural growl of frustration, He lowered the gun. His hand trembled as he shoved it back into the holster. "This isn't over," he spat, backing away. "You'll regret disrespecting me." Evelyn didn't move. She stood tall, her eyes following him like a hawk until he climbed into his SUV and slammed the door. The engine roared, the tires screeched, and the vehicle lurched away into the night. Only when the taillights vanished did she exhale, the faintest release of breath. I stumbled out onto the porch, my legs weak beneath me. I caught her arm, my voice breaking. He pulled a gun on you, Evelyn." He could have. He almost. Her hand covered mine, steadying me. Her eyes, though calm, held a flicker of something deeper, something she rarely let anyone see. "I've faced worse," she said quietly. "But I won't let him terrorize this neighborhood. Not anymore." That night, the house felt different. The air was heavy, the walls humming with the echo of what had nearly happened. I couldn't sleep. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw that gun, black and merciless, pointed at my child. But Evelyn sat at the kitchen table long after midnight, her posture straight, a notebook open before her. She was writing, documenting every detail, every word, every gesture of Gerard's actions. Not for catharsis, not for memory, for evidence. When I asked her softly what she was doing, she didn't look up. Her pen scratched across the page with relentless precision. "Preparing," she said simply. And in that moment, I realized this was only the beginning. Morning sunlight broke over the rooftops like any other day, yet nothing in the neighborhood felt the same. The air itself seemed altered, heavy with whispers that passed from porch to porch, from kitchen table to kitchen table. What had transpired the night before had not gone unseen. Curtains had swayed open, phones had recorded shaky glimpses through half-closed blinds, and words spread faster than wildfire in dry grass. Gerard Lane, the HOA's self-styled security enforcer, had pulled a gun on Evelyn. But the true shock lay in what followed. My daughter's revelation, calm, authoritative, and undeniable, echoed in every whispered retelling. She's FBI. She's a tactical commander. For years, the neighborhood had known Evelyn only as the quiet woman who jogged in the mornings, waved politely, and kept to herself. Now, the veil had lifted. The story spilled out in fragments. She didn't even flinch. She commanded him like a soldier. He looked terrified when she told him who she was. And though fear and gossip swirled around us, what settled deepest in me was something rawer, heavier, pride laced with terror. Pride that my daughter had stood unshaken before a drawn weapon. Terror that she had needed to. By midday, I saw the ripple effect firsthand. Neighbors who usually nodded with detached courtesy now approached cautiously, their eyes wide, their voices lowered. "Is it true?" asked Mrs. Thornton, the elderly widow who lived 2 doors down. Her hands trembled around the handles of her grocery bag. "Your daughter, she's with the FBI?" I hesitated, uncertain how much to reveal, but before I could answer, Evelyn herself appeared from the house. She carried herself with the same unassuming grace she always had, yet now every step seemed magnified under watchful eyes. "Yes," she said simply. Her voice wasn't boastful nor apologetic. It was fact. But what matters is that no one should be threatened in their own neighborhood. Not by anyone. Mrs. Thornton's eyes misted. She touched Evelyn's hand with frail fingers. "God bless you, dear. You're braver than any of us knew." Evelyn gave a faint smile, but I recognized the flicker in her gaze. She didn't want admiration. She wanted accountability. Gerard, meanwhile, had vanished. His SUV was absent from its usual post at the corner of Maple Drive. His house sat dark, curtains drawn, the once gaudy security patrol stickers peeled halfway off the windows. Yet his absence did not soothe me. It unsettled me further. Like a wounded animal retreating into the shadows, Gerard was dangerous precisely because he was out of sight. Evelyn seemed to sense it too. That evening, she sat at the dining table with her laptop open, files and notes spread before her in meticulous order. She was drafting a report, not just of the incident, but of Gerard's entire history of intimidation, harassment, and abuse of authority within the HOA. "You're building a case," I said softly, watching the relentless precision of her typing. "I'm building protection," she corrected. "For you. For every neighbor he's bullied. Men like Gerard don't stop unless they're stopped." There was a gravity to her words that silenced me. The whole board could not remain silent either. By the next week, they convened an emergency meeting in the community hall, a sterile room with beige walls, folding chairs, and the smell of burned coffee. The atmosphere was electric, charged with fear and curiosity. Nearly every homeowner attended, whispers filling the air like static. At the front sat the board members, stiff-backed and uneasy. Their leader, Mrs. Caldwell, a woman with icy blonde hair and an iron will, cleared her throat. "We have gathered," she began, "to address the recent incident involving our security officer, Mr. Lane, and one of our residents." Her words were deliberately vague, designed to smother the fire rather than feed it. But Evelyn's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Let's not minimize it," she said, standing from her chair in the middle of the crowd. Her presence drew every eye. "He pointed a loaded firearm at me on my property. That is not an incident. That is attempted assault with a deadly weapon." Gasps rippled through the room. Mrs. Caldwell's composure faltered. "Ms. Lane, please. This is a private matter." "No," Evelyn interrupted, her tone firm but steady. "This is a matter of public safety. Your so-called security officer is unstable, armed, and a danger to every family in this community." Murmurs of agreement rose from the crowd. A man at the back spoke up. "He threatened my son last year for skateboarding near the cul-de-sac." Another voice chimed in. "He tried to fine me for planting roses without permission." One by one, the stories spilled forth, tales of intimidation, bullying, petty power trips that had gone unchecked for years. The board shifted uncomfortably, their authority slipping as Evelyn's presence emboldened the residents. Finally, Evelyn delivered the blow. "I am an FBI tactical commander. I don't disclose that casually. But you all need to understand that what happened is criminal. If this board does not take action immediately, I will. And I assure you, federal law will not look kindly on negligence." The silence that followed was absolute. Even Mrs. Caldwell, who had long wielded fear as her weapon, looked pale. That night, I found Evelyn on the porch, staring into the dark street. The crickets chirped, and the air carried the faint scent of cut grass. "You shook them," I said quietly. "I didn't want to shake them," she replied. "I wanted them to act. But men like Gerard, they don't go quietly. He'll come back. They always do." Her words lingered in my chest like a stone. And she was right. 2 days later, I awoke at dawn to the sound of tires crunching over gravel. I peeked through the blinds and saw it. Gerard's white SUV, parked across from our house, engine idling. He sat behind the wheel, his face half hidden in shadow, eyes fixed on our home. I felt the chill of dread crawl up my spine. This was no longer about rules or cars parked the wrong way or power within an HOA. This was about obsession. This was about vengeance. I turned to wake Evelyn, but she was already standing behind me, fully dressed, her gaze locked on the window. She had known he would return. Her voice was low, steady, resolute. "It's time to end this." That was the night I realized something. Gerard wasn't just a neighborhood nuisance anymore. He was a man unraveling, dangerous in his desperation, and now cornered by the truth Evelyn had exposed. The lines had been drawn. The storm that had been building for months was ready to break. And my daughter, my Evelyn, stood at the center of it, unshaken, prepared to face whatever came. The days that followed Gerard's reappearance were soaked in unease. His SUV became a ghostly sentinel, appearing at odd hours, sometimes idling near our mailbox in the dawn light, other times creeping slowly past after midnight, headlights off, a predator circling its prey. He never stepped from the vehicle, never spoke a word, but the intent was clear. He was watching. Neighbors noticed. Curtains twitched each time his engine rumbled down the street, and whispers thickened like fog. Mothers clutched their children closer. Fathers checked their locks twice over. Yet, when asked why he hadn't been removed, why the HOA had not stripped him of his so-called authority, the board only shrugged behind closed doors. "They're protecting him," Evelyn muttered one evening as she returned from a jog, sweat glistening on her brow, her jaw taut with frustration. She had spotted him again, parked by the cul-de-sac. "Why?" I asked, though the answer was already forming like poison in my gut. "Because to admit he's dangerous," she said grimly, "is to admit they empowered him. If Gerard falls, they fall with him. So they'll circle the wagons." She was right. That very week, the HOA board distributed a letter to every household typed in formal font and dripping with carefully chosen words. "The recent rumors regarding our dedicated security officer are exaggerated and unfounded. Mr. Lane has served this community faithfully for years, ensuring order and safety. We caution residents against spreading misinformation that may incite unnecessary fear or division." The audacity of it made my hands tremble as I read. They had twisted the truth into a lie so polished it almost gleamed. But behind Evelyn's eyes, I saw no surprise. She had dealt with institutions before, bureaucracies that hid rot beneath polished veneers. "They're afraid of scandal," she said, folding the letter neatly before setting it aside. "But fear won't save them. Evidence will." And so, Evelyn built her fortress. Every evening, she sat at the dining table with files, photographs, and meticulous notes. She cataloged every incident, every witness account from neighbors emboldened by her presence. She interviewed Mrs. Thornton, who recalled Gerard yelling at teenagers with his hand on his holster. Mr. Patel, who described Gerard circling his house 3 nights in a row after a dispute over paint color. The Ramirez family, who confessed they had been too afraid to report him when he threatened to tow their car personally for a cracked windshield. Each story was a brick, and Evelyn was constructing a wall no lie could breach. I watched her sometimes in quiet awe. Her discipline was not loud. It was patient, deliberate, like the rhythm of a steady drum before battle. And yet, when the house grew silent at night, I caught glimpses of the cost. Her shoulders would sag for a heartbeat, her eyes darken with something heavy. I wondered what memories flickered behind them, other confrontations, other weapons raised, other nights where she had stood between chaos and the innocent. "Evelyn," I said one night, my voice softer than the lamp glow that lit her notes, "you don't have to carry all of this alone." She gave a faint smile, weary but unwavering. "Dad, this is who I am. I don't run from storms. I chart them." But Gerard was not idle either. His retaliation grew sharper, more venomous. Anonymous notes appeared in mailboxes, accusing Evelyn of lying, of fabricating her credentials to play hero. One evening, we found our trash bins overturned, and the word liar scrawled in red spray paint across the pavement. "It's him," I spat, fury burning in my chest. Evelyn crouched, studying the letters calmly, as though analyzing the handwriting were a puzzle. "Desperation," she murmured. "He's losing his grip." Yet, desperation in a man like Gerard was dangerous, and the board fed it. At their next closed meeting, one Evelyn and I were not invited to. They discussed removing troublemakers who disrupted community harmony. We knew this only because Mrs. Thornton, bless her fragile courage, had overheard them while delivering cookies to the hall. She relayed it with shaking hands. "They mean your daughter," she whispered, fear etched across her wrinkled face. "They're going to try and force you out." The words struck like ice. The board wasn't just shielding Gerard, they were turning their weapons on us. That night, I found Evelyn on the porch again, staring into the starless dark. Her silhouette was rigid, her breath measured. "They want me gone," she said simply, as though voicing the thought aloud solidified it. "They can't do that," I insisted, though even to my ears my voice wavered. "They'll try," she replied. "But they don't understand. I don't scare easily. And I don't lose battles I didn't choose." She turned to me then, her eyes gleaming with something fierce. "Dad, this isn't just about us anymore. It's about everyone he's ever threatened. Every neighbor who's lived under his shadow. If I leave, he wins. If I stay, they'll learn what real accountability feels like. For a moment, she looked every inch the commander she was, the same calm steel I had seen when a gun was pointed at her head. And yet, beneath it, I still saw my daughter. The little girl who once built forts in the backyard and declared them impenetrable castles. Only now, her fortress was truth, and her enemy was a man armed with both bullets and lies. The escalation came 2 nights later. I was dozing on the couch when a noise jolted me awake, the sharp crack of glass breaking. My heart lurched as I sprang to my feet. Evelyn was already there, moving swiftly, silently, her flashlight cutting across the living room. The kitchen window had been shattered, glass glittering across the floor. On the counter lay a brick, tied with a note in jagged handwriting. "Get out before it's too late." My blood ran cold. Evelyn picked it up carefully, slipping the paper into a plastic sleeve she had retrieved from her files. Even now, her composure held. But when she looked at me, her eyes softened, betraying the smallest flicker of sorrow. "I'm sorry you're dragged into this," she whispered. I shook my head, anger tightening my throat. "No, don't you dare apologize. He's the one who should be sorry. And he will be." Evelyn placed a steady hand on my shoulder. "He will be," she echoed. "But we'll do it the right way. No fear. No retreat." The next morning, Evelyn visited the local police precinct. I watched her leave in her crisp navy jacket, her file of evidence tucked beneath her arm. For the first time since the confrontation, I felt a strange glimmer of hope. She was no longer fighting alone in the shadows. She was bringing light into the darkness. Yet part of me still trembled. Gerard had tasted humiliation, and men like him did not swallow it quietly. The board had tied their fate to his, and desperation made allies of the corrupt. The storm was not over. It was gathering strength, and though Evelyn carried herself with the calm of a seasoned commander, I knew, deep in my bones, that the most dangerous clash was yet to come. The day Evelyn walked into the police precinct with her file of evidence, the quiet war in our neighborhood crossed a threshold. Until then, it had been whispers and threats, shadows moving across our street, notes slipped into mailboxes. But when she returned that afternoon, her stride purposeful, her jaw set with iron resolve, I knew the fight was about to change. "They took me seriously," she said, placing the file on our dining table. Her hands, steady as stone, spread the pages with a precision that reminded me of a general laying out battle plans. I showed them his record of intimidation, the witness statements, the photograph of the brick with the note. "They've opened an investigation." Relief flooded me, tempered with unease. "That's good, isn't it? Finally, he'll face consequences." Evelyn's eyes lifted to mine, calm but unflinching. "It's good, but it also means he'll panic. And when men like Gerard panic, they lash out." She was right. That evening, Gerard returned, not with his SUV idling in silence this time, but with rage boiling over. He parked in the middle of the cul-de-sac, headlights blazing, horn blaring in sharp, angry bursts that shattered the peace. Neighbors peeked through blinds, some stepping cautiously onto porches. He stood outside his vehicle, fists clenched, veins bulging in his neck. His voice thundered across the quiet houses. "You think you can ruin me? You think you can take everything I've built? She's a fraud. She's nothing. And anyone who sides with her will regret it." I felt my pulse race as I stood inside, my hands shaking with the urge to storm outside. But Evelyn was already moving. She stepped onto the porch, her silhouette backlit by the warm glow of our house, calm against his fury. "Gerard," she called, her voice cutting clear through the chaos. "Go home. You're making this worse for yourself." He spun, eyes wild. "You don't scare me. You think you can hide behind a badge, behind your lies? You're finished." But Evelyn didn't flinch. She descended the steps slowly, deliberately, until she stood at the edge of the lawn. Her posture radiated command, though she never raised her voice. "This is your last chance. Walk away." The neighbors held their breath. The night felt brittle, ready to shatter. And then sirens wailed in the distance. Red and blue lights pierced the dark. Police cruisers turned onto the cul-de-sac, engines humming, tires crunching gravel. Gerard froze, his fury twisting into disbelief. "You called them on me?" "No," Evelyn said evenly, as the first officers stepped out, hands resting near their holsters. "I reported you." And they came. What followed was a scene I'll never forget. The officers approached, firm but measured, instructing Gerard to place his hands on the hood of his SUV. He resisted at first, shouting that he was the real security here, that Evelyn was a liar, that the entire neighborhood was conspiring against him. But the evidence Evelyn had delivered earlier in the day had already set the stage. The officers were not listening to him. They were watching him like the threat he had proven to be. When he refused to comply, they moved swiftly. In seconds, Gerard was face down on the hood, his arms twisted behind him, steel cuffs clicking shut around his wrists. His voice, once thunderous, cracked into a pitiful roar. "You'll regret this, all of you. I'll come back, you'll see." The neighbors erupted, not in fear, but in a collective exhale of relief. Some clapped, others muttered prayers of thanks. For the first time in years, Gerard Lane's reign of intimidation had been broken. But Evelyn wasn't smiling. She stood with arms crossed, her gaze fixed on the man being shoved into the back of the police cruiser. Her expression was unreadable, as though calculating the next move in a battle not yet finished. The whole board scrambled in the days that followed. Their carefully crafted letter dismissing the incident became a liability, their silence damning. At an emergency meeting, Evelyn and I sat near the front, surrounded by neighbors whose fear had transformed into anger. Mrs. Caldwell, the board president, looked pale, her composure unraveling. "We never authorized him to carry a firearm," she insisted, her voice trembling. "We had no idea he would escalate." "That's a lie," a man from the back interrupted. "I told you last year he was armed, and you brushed it off." Others joined in, voices rising, accusations flying. The board, once untouchable, now sat cornered under the weight of their own negligence. Evelyn stood, her voice cutting through the uproar like a bell. "You enabled him. You empowered him. You dismissed every warning until a man drew a gun on me in broad daylight. That is not leadership, that is complicity." Mrs. Caldwell's lips parted, but no words came. The silence that followed was damning. By the end of that meeting, petitions were already circulating to remove the board. The HOA, once feared, was crumbling. Yet even as justice closed in, I saw no triumph in Evelyn's eyes. That night, as we sat on the porch, I finally asked the question that had been burning inside me. "Evelyn, how did you stay so calm, with a gun pointed at you?" She was quiet for a long time, the night pressing around us. Finally, she spoke, her voice low, steady. "Because I've been there before. Not here, not with him, but in places far darker. I've stared down men with rifles, with bombs strapped to their chests, with nothing to lose. You learn to still your heart, to let fear pass through you, not into you. If you don't, you die." Her words chilled me, but they also filled me with awe. She had carried so much, hidden so much. And yet, here she was, standing not just for herself, but for all of us. "You saved us," I whispered. Her gaze softened then, just for a moment. "No, Dad." I reminded them they could save themselves. But Gerard was not finished. Even from behind bars, his venom seeped through. Calls to neighbors, threats scribbled in letters smuggled from county jail, rumors that he would take back what was his once released. Evelyn monitored it all, documenting each piece. She knew battles didn't end with handcuffs, they ended with convictions. And so she prepared for the final step, the court. The trial came swiftly, propelled by the mountain of evidence Evelyn had assembled. I sat in the courtroom, heart pounding, as witness after witness recounted Gerard's reign of intimidation. The broken window, the brick with the note, the countless stories of threats and harassment. When Evelyn took the stand, the room fell silent. She recounted the night of the gun with the same steady calm she had shown in the moment itself. not dramatized, not embellished, just precise, controlled, undeniable. The defense tried to paint Gerard as misunderstood, a man pushed too far, a community protector unfairly maligned. But Evelyn dismantled every claim with the quiet authority of someone who knew the weight of truth. By the time the verdict came, it was no surprise. Guilty. As Gerard was led away, eyes wild, mouth spitting curses that no one heard, I felt a strange mix of emotions wash over me: relief, sorrow, pride, exhaustion. And when Evelyn stepped out of the courthouse, the neighbors who had once whispered behind curtains now gathered openly, thanking her, embracing her, calling her the hero they had needed all along. But Evelyn only shook her head, her voice quiet but firm. "Don't thank me. Just don't forget. Never let fear silence you again." That night, as we sat together on the porch one final time, I looked at her, my daughter, the commander, the protector, and felt tears sting my eyes. "You've carried so much," I whispered. "I wish you didn't have to." She rested her hand on mine, her eyes soft in the glow of the porch light. "It's what I was made for, Dad. But tonight, I'm just your daughter again." And for the first time in weeks, the night was peaceful. No headlights, no threats, no shadows lurking in the cul-de-sac. Just the sound of crickets, the cool breeze through the oak leaves, and the knowledge that the storm had finally passed. The trial was over. The verdict had been delivered, and Gerard Lane was no longer a looming shadow in our neighborhood. Yet, as the courthouse doors closed behind us that day, I realized the story hadn't truly ended. Justice had been served in the legal sense, yes, but the deeper question lingered. What would remain after the storm? The neighborhood had been changed. Fear had given way to relief, but relief gave way to reflection. For years, people had lived under Gerard's reign of intimidation, not because they agreed with him, but because they were too afraid to challenge him. That fear had made them silent, and their silence had made him powerful. Now, with him gone, they were left staring at their own complicity. The first sign of change came at the very next home meeting. The old board, Mrs. Caldwell and her cohort, resigned under pressure, their credibility shattered. In their place, neighbors who had once kept quiet now stepped forward. Mr. Patel, Mrs. Thornton, the Ramirez family, people who had once trembled behind curtains now spoke with firm voices about transparency, fairness, and safety. I watched it all from the back row, heart swelling with quiet pride. Not pride in them, though their courage was admirable. Pride in Evelyn. She had been the catalyst, the spark that reignited something they had long buried. But Evelyn didn't bask in their praise. She attended the meeting, yes, but sat quietly, listening more than speaking. When she was thanked directly, she simply replied, "You don't need me anymore. You found your voice. Use it." Back home, the house felt different too. The tension that had once clung to every creak of the floorboards, every shadow outside the window, had dissipated. At night, I slept without waking at phantom noises. I no longer checked the locks twice over. But Evelyn, she carried something deeper. One evening, I found her in the backyard, staring at the old oak tree where she'd built forts as a child. Her arms were crossed, her gaze distant. "Thinking?" I asked gently, stepping beside her. She smiled faintly. "Remember when I used to call this tree my castle? I'd sit up there for hours, convinced I could see the whole world." I chuckled. "You never did grow out of guarding castles." Her smile faltered, replaced by a weight in her eyes. "I sometimes wonder, Dad, how much of me is still that girl, or if I lost her somewhere along the way." I placed a hand on her shoulder. "She's still there. She's just stronger now. Wiser, maybe a little bruised, but not gone." She didn't reply, but the silence between us was comfortable. Healing. The resolution wasn't only personal, it was communal. A month after the trial, the new HOA board organized a neighborhood gathering. No agendas, no policies, no power games. Just families on lawns, children playing without fear, laughter echoing down streets once soaked in tension. As I stood among them, I saw something remarkable. People reconnecting. Conversations that had long been avoided blossomed anew. Neighbors who had once looked away when Gerard patrolled now spoke openly, sharing stories of how afraid they had been and how grateful they were that the silence was broken. Mrs. Thornton clutched Evelyn's hand, tears in her eyes. "You gave us back our home," she said softly. But Evelyn shook her head. "No, you reclaimed it yourselves. I just reminded you it was possible." Yet, for all the progress, shadows still lingered in small ways. I caught myself wondering, would Gerard's threats echo after his sentence was served? Would another man like him rise, cloaked in authority, feeding off fear? When I voiced this to Evelyn, she looked at me with calm certainty. "Maybe," she said, "but now they know how to fight. That's the difference." She was right. The neighborhood was no longer naive. They had been tested and found their courage. Fear might return someday, but it would not find them silent again. For Evelyn, the resolution was quieter, more internal. She never glorified what happened, never framed herself as the savior others painted her to be. Instead, she folded the experience into the quiet armor she already carried. One night, as we sat on the porch together, the same porch where so many tense nights had unfolded, I asked her what it all meant to her. She thought for a long moment before answering. It reminded me why I chose this path. Not the tactical gear, not the titles, but this: protecting people who don't even know how strong they are yet. Standing between them and the thing they fear, just long enough for them to see they can stand too. Her words sank deep into me, and I realized then that the impact wasn't just on the neighbors or on her, but on me. I had watched my daughter walk through fire with unshakable calm. I had seen the little girl who built castles become a woman who defended them, not just for herself, but for everyone. And in that realization, I felt something profound: peace. Months later, when the seasons turned and the first snowfall blanketed the cul-de-sac, I stood at the window watching children build snowmen, their laughter ringing out like bells. No SUV idled at the corner. No shadows lingered at the edges. Evelyn walked in behind me, a cup of coffee in her hands, and for the first time in a long while, her smile was unguarded. "You know," I said, my throat tightening with emotion, "you didn't just stop him. You changed this place forever." She looked out at the snow, at the children, at the neighbors waving warmly to one another. Then she turned back to me, her eyes soft, steady. "No, Dad, we changed it, together." And in that moment, I understood. The resolution wasn't just the absence of Gerard, or the fall of a corrupt board, or even the victory in court. It was this: the rebirth of trust, the restoration of courage, the reminder that fear only wins when good people remain silent. That was the true impact. That was the lasting legacy.